Hi everyone, welcome to the Find Your Fall CSA Fair Winter Squash Chef Demo. We're really excited you're joining us today. We're just going to give folks a few seconds to trickle in from the waiting room. So thank you again for joining us. We're excited to be with Chef Tanya today. We're going to be talking about all things winter squash. So if you have any squash goals this fall, you came to the right place. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know kind of time is of the essence right now. We have a lot to get to with our winter squash chef demo. And I just want to give you an overview of what we're going to cover today. Going to introduce the fall CSA fair. So if you're not familiar with this event, that's what this chef demo is a part of today. So I'll let you learn a little bit more about that. We've been promoting fall CSA shares for 8 days. So this is our final day, and we're really excited to have lots of offerings for folks to connect with local farmers in their area. Once I introduce that event, I'm going to pass it off to Chef Tanya. She's going to talk a little bit more about our chef demo today. She's going to be featuring 2 different recipes. She has a roasted acorn squash with greens and a mushroom ricotta. And then she also has a fall squash agrodolce, or like a sweet and sour squash. So really exciting recipes for you. If you have any questions about those recipes specifically, drop them into the chat. If you have any general questions, drop into the chat. Anything that you want to learn more about. We'll have time at the end for questions. And then the Find Your Fall CSA virtual fair. I mentioned that the chef demo today is a part of that event. We are hosting this virtual fair in the CSA in Kentucky Facebook group, and we're featuring over 25 farms. So we're featuring them over 8 days. So we're featuring 3 to 4 farms a day, and all of those farms have ways for you to sign up for a farm subscription in September, October, and November and December. So for the rest of the year, they have opportunities to kind of connect with them and find their products. And if you're curious, all of the posts are in the Facebook group. We'll drop that into the chat. We also are really, the CSA directory that Kentucky Proud has put together is a really great, robust resource. You can look at all of the farms and list them by season, so you can see what season they offer a CSA. And you can also go to the very bottom on your desktop and look at a county by county CSA map to find options in your area as well. And if you've seen our hashtag this week, the Fall in Love with Your Farmer, that's a part of this event. And then if anyone on the call isn't familiar with CSA or what the acronym stands for, we spent 8 days kind of promoting these offerings. And if you're definitely always like to share what CSA means. So in short, I just want to give you an overview of this food purchasing model. If you're interested in getting more local foods, CSA is essentially a local food subscription. So you can purchase it from a farmer in your area. You normally pay for at least partial of the share in advance. And that really helps support the farm earlier in the growing season or earlier in whatever growing season they're in. And they have a secure market for their product, and you get first access to all of their produce. So in this picture, we're highlighting a fall CSA share. So you can see all of the beautiful fall vegetables when you sign up for a produce CSA, but you can also get a CSA for meat, for eggs, for flowers, even for dairy. So today we're featuring a dairy share. So lots of options in Kentucky. If you have questions around CSA, let us know. We love CSA because it's more than just a subscription. It's about the relationship with the farm, and it's about connecting with the farm. And when you're part of a CSA, you're usually receiving regular updates from the farm. You have opportunities to maybe visit the farm and kind of stay more connected with who the farmers are that are growing your food and how it's grown. And so without further ado, I want to pass it off to Chef Tanya here. Chef Tanya is a chef of many years and is also the program coordinator for the Food Connection. She is going to be showing off these winter squash recipes for us today. And she's going to be showing them off in the Food Connection kitchen. So if you're not familiar with the Food Connection, she's going to share a little bit more about them. They're based at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky, and they really work to connect producers and eaters in the food system. Chef T, do you want to share a little bit more? I know you have a good little summary of the Food Connection.
Absolutely, Katie, and thank you for that introduction. I am a program coordinator at the Food Connection. We are a college level Applied Food Systems Unit. So we are all about getting more local food into more spaces, but specifically here on campus and institutions like it. Our executive director, Dr. Ashton Potter Wright, before she came to us this spring, spent 8 years doing value chain coordination for the city, and she is continuing that work. We also have a senior extension associate, Brian Brady, who goes out on farms to get them GAP certified so more and more farmers can be in the pipeline to institutions like the University of Kentucky, but also all over the state. He has increased the number of GAP certified farmers since he's been in his role for the past 6 years by 10-fold. So we're very proud of the work that we're all doing. A lot of people don't see that work. They see my work because mine is the most public facing, in that we have hands-on cooking classes and demonstrations featuring and educating about local foods and why we think they're important.
And then do you want to just share briefly what the recipes you're showing off today, Chef T?
Absolutely. I have 2 recipes for you today. We should have plenty of time to get those in and still leave questions, a time for question and answer for you. The first one is an acorn squash, which we're going to stuff with ricotta that has some local greens and local mushrooms sauteed and added to that. We are also going to use a butternut squash, and we're going to cut that up and drizzle it with a sweet and sour sauce, an Italian sweet and sour sauce called Agrodolce. So I hope you'll enjoy these. I will start the Agrodolce sauce, but then we'll switch over very quickly to the stuffed acorn squash and then come back to the Agrodolce. If you have any questions whatsoever, put them in the chat. We have lots of folks who are gonna pass those along to me, and I won't be able to follow the chat as I'm busy with the demo for you. But let me know if you can't hear, if you can't see. I'll try to adjust as best as possible. We do have a lot of equipment that has fans and motors, so I hope that we can get everything to you as clearly as possible with this mic in this space. All right, so we're going to start with the Agrodolce. The first thing I'm going to do for that, and again, that just means sweet and sour. So I have some red wine vinegar here. You can pretty much use whatever is in your pantry. I have some local honey. This is Central Kentucky honey out of Columbia, Kentucky. And then I have some peppers. Now, I do have a habanero. If you don't want heat in this, that's perfectly fine. You can leave that out. And in fact, I don't want a lot of heat. I just want the flavor. So I'm just going to cut the habanero in half. And then I have these gorgeous nardello peppers. Nardellos are a thin, kind of bullhorn shaped pepper. They don't have a lot of flesh, but they have a tremendous amount of very fruity flavor. They're one of my favorites, and they are not hot. They have a really complex flavor, actually. They're a little bit different than your just sweet bell peppers. So I hope you are, if you have a CSA or if you go to the farmers markets, maybe you can spy some of these, but they're super flavorful. And I'm just going to cut the stems off those, and I'm going to cut them into manageable pieces and split them open and get rid of the seed pods up in the top. And then I'm cutting these into little rings. I probably will leave these in the Agrodolce sauce. Now the habaneros I will pull out. So we're just slicing that up thin. And again, I have pre-roasted my acorn squash, but if we have time at the end, I can certainly go over the best method for doing that. If you have questions about it or about different squashes that you may have or have seen. So I've just got a little sauce pot here. I'm putting that pepper in there. I'm putting the habanero in there. And I'm going to take my spat and stir in the 1.5 cups of red wine vinegar. This is a 1/2 cup of the honey. Get all that in there. So you see where the sweet and sour comes from. And this is a wonderful sauce that you can use on just about any squash. It goes great on anything that has that sort of squash sweetness. And I'm going to do a pinch of salt and a pinch of pepper. And then if you don't have fresh peppers, but want a little bit of heat, you could also use a little crushed red pepper. And I have an Italian crushed red pepper called, the variety is Aleppo. And we're just gonna put that on. Got to get my burner on high. I'm gonna turn it on high first. And get it up to a boil so that everything comes together. As soon as it does, I'm gonna brush my butternuts with that, and then I'm gonna put the sauce back on to simmer and reduce just a little bit. While we wait for that to happen, I'm going to show you what I do with the acorn squash. So I have an empty acorn squash here. It's already been roasted off. I just split it, scoop the seeds out, oil, salt, pepper, and let it roast. Then I have a red onion, and I'm just gonna julienne that.
And Chef T, what does julienne mean?
Julienne is cutting into really thin strips, typically about a quarter of an inch or smaller. And the average length is about 3 inches. These are shorter because of the size of the onion. So we're just cutting them into little fine strips. They will fall apart, and that's fine. I have about 3 cloves of garlic that I have minced. I want to take some of these beautiful local mushrooms. I know it's not frequent, but sometimes there are mushrooms in some of the CSA shares, but they are definitely in the local farmers markets because so many, and they have such gorgeous mushrooms out there right now. I can't resist, especially in the fall, to add in some mushrooms. And I'm just slicing these up. These are gorgeous blue oyster mushrooms. They have that sort of kind of tawny gray brown to them. And I really don't have to remove very much, just any of the parts that seem a little tough. You can take those off and then just slice those up. Lastly, I have some local collards. We'll see a lot of greens from here on out through fall in what our farmers are bringing to us. So I'm just gonna strip this. This is collards. I'm gonna strip it off the stem. And I'm probably even going to tear it. This is a huge leaf. Now, I don't cook collards very far. Even though a lot of people think you have to steam them all day, but you don't. You can still just cut them into thin ribbons and saute them a bit till they wilt. And they'll still be tender enough to eat this way. I also have a little bit of local arugula. You could use any of the greens that you find and love. So you could use kale, chard, spinach, any of the UK CSA has their braising mix now. That would be great for this. So I've already got a lot of it cut up. I just wanted to demo that first leaf. The first thing I'm going to do is take all of these elements and I'm going to saute them together, and I can show you that. I'm going to turn you around. Try not to make you dizzy here. Having an Henri burner today. There we go. So I've got that back saute pan on medium-high heat. I've still got my Agrodolce sauce on high heat because I'm trying to bring that up to a boil. I have a wee bit of extra virgin olive oil, and I'm going to start with my onions and then add the shrooms. Actually, I may just add those together. I'll put them in the same bowl. Onions and shrooms, and then I'll add my garlic second. We've chopped the garlic up really small, and garlic is more oily than it is watery like these other veg. And we want these vegetables to give off their water to prevent the garlic from burning. So I almost always add it second. So we'll squeeze just enough oil in the bottom of the pan to coat it. You're forming a barrier between the hot metal and the veg. You're not trying to coat all your veg. Let's make this around just a little bit. I'm trying to peek around my mic. So I'm going to go in the pan. We always go in really close to the oil so we don't splatter hot oil back up on ourselves. And I've got my high heat silicone spat. Or I could use these tongs that I have here, and I'm just gonna move that around a little bit. I do want to leave the mushrooms there just for a moment, kind of like you would sear off a steak or a chicken breast. I want them to sear just a moment and take on some of that brown color. And then I'm going to add, once the onions start to turn transparent, slightly translucent, I should say, I'm going to add the garlic, and then we'll add the greens last. Now, that's mushroom and greens ricotta. So I have my ricotta right here. There's nothing wrong with it. I've just put it in some cheesecloth in a strainer and let it sit for about an hour. That takes out excess moisture. Ricotta can be kind of watery. You could also use a goat cheese or your favorite farmer's cheese for this. If there, I don't know if that's part of the dairy CSA yet or not, but that would be pretty awesome if it were. So I've got my ricotta in the pan. I'm going to stir these onions, and you can see my sauce is coming together now. Let's just see both of those. So I'm going to turn that down just a bit. I have some roasted and peeled butternut over here. So I'm going to brush it with my sauce, my sweet and sour sauce, and then I'm going to let that reduce while we do everything else. Just a light brushing. And I'm doing this on a separate plate than what I'm going to do my final plating on, because it's going to make a bit of a mess. And then I'm going to set that aside. Let's stir those onions and shrooms now. They're starting to brown. Onions are getting translucent. So I'm going to add my garlic. And that will saute just for one more minute. Maybe not even that long. Going to add just a pinch of salt. Season everything, and a tiny pinch of pepper, which I'm typically careful about adding pepper at the beginning of a recipe, but that was a tiny, tiny amount. And now that my onions are starting to get soft, I'm going to add those greens. Now, I'm going to add what appears to be an amount that's too big for the pan, but they will wilt down. And what I'm going to do is turn the hot food over on the greens.
And Chef T, just a quick question about the black pepper. Why do you hesitate, or why would you caution people to add less pepper?
Not less pepper. I just tend to add my pepper at the end. I love black pepper, but if it sits in a dish really long, it can take over the flavor and it can overwhelm the dish. But I love black pepper. It's very floral for the sort of harshness of black pepper. It has a wonderful floral quality, so I do want to add that in. I just usually wait till the end, so it keeps that floral quality, but it doesn't overwhelm any dish. And now I'm going to season my greens, because we've added a lot of volume here since we last added salt. And I'm going to go ahead and add pepper there. Keep trying to knock my spat over. All right, so spin you around again. You don't need to watch the Agrodolce sit there and just boil. So we'll come back over here, and here is my ricotta. And I've got these wonderful sauteed veggies now, and they smell amazing. Now, I would use this on a lot of things just as is, but this is going to make it even richer. And now that we're heading into the cold season, my thoughts turn to more like rich and comforting and sort of those hibernation recipes. So I'm going to add all of these greens to that ricotta. And I'm just gonna mix that together. The heat from the veg are gonna soften the ricotta, and that will make it easier to spread. And then when you get everything together, you can add your favorite grated cheese. I have Kenny Mattingly's Farmhouse Peppercorn Asiago. If anybody's seen it in many of my demos, you know I love that cheese. It's one of my favorites. All right, so we've got that mixed all together. I'm going to take about an ounce of the cheese and add that in. And after I do that, I'm going to taste it for seasoning. And then we'll stuff our acorn. So I always have my tasting spoons handy. Oh, that's wonderful. A little bit more salt, a little bit more pepper.
Chef T,
can you add? You can't take out. So
yeah, can you give us a quick rundown of what's in your bowl right now? Like what's in the stuffing that you're going to use?
Yes, absolutely. We have sauteed red onion, mushrooms, oyster mushrooms in this case, garlic minced, some chopped or sliced collard greens and arugula, drained ricotta, and about an ounce of grated semi-medium hard cheese, and salt and pepper. So that's what we've got in the mix. That's our stuffing. And here we have our acorn squash. And now I have a larger spoon. I like the control of a spoon when I'm stuffing. And we're going to fill this cavity and kind of heap it up a little bit above. We don't want it top heavy because it will fall over on a roasting tray. And then you can put a sprinkle of the cheese on top so that it gets all nice and melty, and place that on a roasting pan. You could line it if you want to, but I've got the magic of TV here because we don't want to leave that in there 15 to 20 minutes while everyone's just watching. So I'm going to pull out one I have ready. And you see the cheese is all melty and it's filled and warm and wonderful. We're going to throw that on a plate. This right here. Get this out so I don't burn myself. Maybe garnish with a little bit. I've got some sage from the UK CSA farm, so we'll put that right there. I could have even used that in the stuffing if I wanted. So there's number one. And now that our syrup, our sweet and sour sauce has been cooking together, I'll get this out of the way. Now I just took the butternut. I can demo really fast. Once it's cooked, it's easier to peel with a knife rather than a peeler. A peeler will hang on a cooked object, pretty much any cooked object. So I like to use the knife, and it's easy to cut the neck from the bowl. So this is your neck. That's your bowl. The bowl will cook faster. If you're doing a lot of these together, say you're going to make butternut bisque, you might even want to cook the bowls all in one tray and the necks on another, because the bowls will cook faster because they're thinner. And then I just cut away from myself. Find a flat surface, and a lot of times when they're roasted like this, the peel will just come right off. If you're finding it difficult to peel, there are very few recipes that I don't part cook my squash before. Usually braises, things like that. It just makes it a lot easier to get this peel off. Fall and winter squashes are so hard and so difficult to peel that I tend to part cook all of them. So that's it on that. And then I've just sliced the neck.
And Chef T, could you give us a, like if people want to part cook at home, how do they do that with the butternut squash?
With the butternut or any squash, you just take it, I think we have time for that demo. I'll do it with the acorn. That's what I have here, but it's the same almost across the board. I take the stem off and I've tossed it in my discard bowl. And then wherever you can, you just sort of find the center of your squash. And this is true for any squash. And then I like to stab it and then sort of lever my knife down. I find that's the safest route. It's just to find a point where I can push and sort of the angle does the work, not me. And then you can typically split them open. You can use a spoon to get all of the seed. This is actually called an ovary, where all the seeds are kept. You can use a spoon, but I find it easier with an ice cream scoop or a portion scoop because it almost cuts as it goes, and you get the seeds and most of the pulp out with 1 or 2 scoops. And then depending on the squash, you can oil it, salt and pepper it. Some people like to put them in a baking dish and put a little water in the bottom. That's fine. I tend to just roast because I like to concentrate the sugars instead of steaming. Sometimes I'll brush them with something else if I'm looking for a particular flavor. If I'm going more toward an Asian dish, I might brush some soy on top. Soy and fall squash were meant to go together. So those are some options there. I'm going to transfer that butternut to my final plate. And I think I'm gonna leave my little arch off. The bowl's got a little overcooked. And I'm going to tile the butternut. And then we've got this marvelous sauce over here. At this point, I would pull out the habaneros. You want to be careful. This is a vinegar-based sauce, and now it's nice and hot. Can be a little sharp to breathe in. All right, and I have another spoon here. I like, again, spoons for control. And you just take your Agrodolce. And those nardellos add that lovely red color. And this sweet and sour sauce is a perfect foil to this super sweet squash. Butternuts tend to be sweeter. Butternuts might be the sweetest. I don't know. We'd have to look into that.
And Chuck,
yes.
Oh, sorry. Can you remind us what's in your sauce? What you're spooning in case anyone missed that in the
sauce
beginning?
is 3 parts of red wine vinegar to 1 part honey, hot chili pepper. I used a habanero, and some mild red peppers. These are nardellos. I used a couple of those, and just a little bit of salt. And I would finish with a little sprinkle of salt on top. And there you have that dish. It's a wonderful fall dish with fall colors as the leaves change. I had initially planned to do some delicata squash. They're my favorites. But what I have is already kind of broken down into these little slices. But I went ahead and threw them on a sheet pan, just tossed them in a bowl with oil, salt, and pepper, and then roasted them off so you get this nice caramelization. What's nice about delicatas is you do still need to seed them, but you don't have to peel them. The peels are edible. They're not very tough at all. And you can cut them into rings or boats or little chunks just like this. And there are so many different things that you can do to top your squash. So I have a few things, and we may just kind of throw a lot of different, the kitchen sink on here in the last minute. So I've got a little bit more of that ricotta. You could use, as I say, goat cheese. A local farmer's cheese would be lovely. I'm just doing a couple of sort of footballs of that on there. It's a wonderful foil. In my mortar and pestle, I have some roasted hazelnuts. If you can tolerate tree nuts, nuts and seeds are wonderful. If you can't tolerate nuts, then go the seed route. Sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, any of that would be wonderful. I'm just going to crush these up lightly. I want big chunky pieces. Hazelnuts are wonderful with sweet squashes as well. I love sage and hazelnut with sweet squashes or with squash bisque. They're wonderful accompaniments. And that's one way to use up a lot of squash. You can also take a big batch of squash bisque and freeze it and just have it throughout the winter. All right, so we've crushed those up. I'm going to sprinkle those on. And then as the last couple of ideas, I wanted to have a little bit of green tomato chutney that we made with some of the last of the South Farm green tomatoes. So sweet on sweet and sour also here as well. And then there are the garnishes. So I have my choice here of, and what I'm going to use is a spice blend as my final garnish. I was talking about these yesterday when we're talking about how to really use up your pantry. I'm a big proponent of making your own spice blends because that way, one, you can get double duty out of your spices and you don't have a bunch of stuff that you may not use. You can just make this in amounts that you would use up. So this is called za'atar. And it is a mix of sumac, which I can talk about that in a minute, sesame, thyme, some people use oregano, coriander, and a little cumin. And that is my final garnish. So there are so many different ways. You could use citrus, anything in the world that goes well with sweet things that balances out sweet. So salty, sour, even bitter would go well with some of this. I roast radicchio and make a salad with that in fall squash. So you've got the sweet and the bitter. Or vinaigrettes would be great on this as well. So lots and lots of ideas. But now I've run out.
No, this is great. This is great. I'm gonna jump in here and we can talk a little bit about I dropped in just to see if anyone had questions in the chat. So feel free, anyone on the call, if you have a question, drop it in. I have lots of questions to get us going because I know winter squash is, there's a lot of squashes in the winter squash family. And was just wondering if we could kick it off, Chef T, with just a quick definition of like the difference between a summer squash and a winter squash. If folks are getting a CSA, they're going to see those changes, right? And what makes them different, and how do you store them?
Well, the difference primarily you'll see, first of all, is the water content. So your summer squashes are typically your zucchini, your yellow, your zephyrs, your patty pans, those kinds of varieties. They tend to be green and yellow, and they tend to have a ton of water. So and they're more delicate in nature because they contain so much water. They can be crushed easily, bruised easily. So you don't have to cook them very long, right? They're tender. You can eat them raw, in fact. But if you do cook them, you don't have to cook them long. So that's kind of how you'll use and see your summer squash. For fall and winter squash, we're talking about your storage squash. So this is nice in that you don't have to use them up that great. They will sit sometimes, like I have spaghetti and butternut squash just sitting out in the kitchen right now. Or you could store them in a cool, dark place if you have a basement or cellar. And they'll last for months and months. So that's a nice feature of these winter squash. They're also much more dense and fibrous. They contain some water, but not hardly as much as the summer squashes do. And you tend to get much more sweet and even spicier flavors when you're talking about fall and winter squash. And also the seed pods in fall and winter squash are ones that you can eat of pretty much every squash. If you have ever saved your seeds from carving a pumpkin in October, you can do the same thing with your fall and winter squash. Just pull the seeds out of the pulp, give them a good rinse, and then dry them out in the oven, a little salt, and they're super tasty, and they give great crunch to everything.
Oh, and that's awesome, because Cindy had asked that in the chat. She was asking if you could roast those seeds like pumpkin seeds. So pretty much anything roasted, just like a pumpkin seed. And
oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and I've in my experience just working on different farms, it's also easy to save that seed if you might want to grow like a winter squash in your home garden, right? You can save that same seed for planting potentially.
Yes, that you would just leave out to dry. You would rinse off as much of the pulp as possible, spread out, and leave them out to dry. And it's almost like a fermentation process, I think, that you need to do so that you can replant them. I'm not
Yeah.
a plant scientist.
No, you're good. You're good. There's
But
lots
that's what I've been told, and that's what I grew up with.
Yeah. And just a quick refresher, you touched on this, but, you know, main differences, right? The winter squash is a firm skin, you know, almost all the time you're going to peel it. You showed us a great way of how to peel and prep it. To my knowledge, is the delicata squash the only one that you can eat the skin? Or, I mean, I know like a little butternut squash skin, like, right?
Right. I mean, it's not that there's nothing poisonous or toxic in these skins, or at least not in an amount where it would harm you. It's just that they're tougher. And
Yeah.
everything that I can think of, yeah, delicata is the only one that comes to my mind right now. I think sometimes if you get the really tiny baby acorns, you might be able to. And if I stuff an acorn, I don't peel it. I just sort of eat down to the skin.
No, absolutely. Well, and you said, you know, if you're really struggling to do the peeling or the cutting, go with Chef T's method of par baking. What do you recommend if someone wants to use the microwave to help with the skin? Would you recommend that method, or do you like the oven better?
That method, I have not personally tried it, but I mean,
Okay.
There's a great New York Times article about how to really use your microwave well, you basically use it as a steamer. So I think that would work in this case too. So all you need is just enough heat to loosen the skins.
But you're using your oven kind of that same way, right? To kind of, yep. Awesome. Well, and feel free to drop anything else in the chat if you have questions about the, peeling process. Bethany had a good question in terms of, if maybe you're getting a lot of winter squash in your share and you're kind of like, okay, how do I process all of this winter squash? Like, what would you maybe do for like food preservation of winter squash? What are some ways you like to put it up potentially and savor later?
Well, with these delicata, we just cut into small pieces. Par roast it a little bit. Whatever water it does, anytime you have water in something you're going to freeze, what it does is water crystals are larger when they freeze. So it expands and tears open the plant cell wall. That's why whenever you freeze anything, it kind of goes when you thaw it back out. So if you can get water out of things before you freeze them, or cook it out or blanch it out, then you're going to have less of that breakdown once you freeze. So I did par roast this, and the same thing with butternut. I pretty much just roast it, peel it, cut it into chunks, throw it into a gallon bag. And with something more like these butternut bowls or the acorn squash or something that I could use for a puree, I'll just go ahead and roast it way down, puree it, and freeze it that way.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the puree is kind of my go-to, like just at home, puree it and then throw it into soups, or I'll even do like smoothies, I guess, like, just different things. I'm trying to think of, you showed us today kind of the like stuffing of the roasted squash, like really beautiful way to like serve it with a delicious kind of like tangy sauce. Do you have any other kind of maybe template recipes for fall dishes that you just like a couple that you've done at the Food Connection, and we can drop some links in when we share the recipes, but just any favorites that you love that maybe would lend itself to winter squash, but you could use other things?
Yes, I use fall squash in stir fries and hashes, almost all. Tonight I'm going to make a fall harvest hash, and I'm throwing butternut squash into that. It's wonderful in stir fries. I know people think, oh, sweet, but I put sweet potatoes and fall squashes in my stir fries all the time. They're a wonderful foil to all of the other vegetables that you have in a stir fry. So you get that balance of all 5 flavors. And then one of my favorite squashes that I haven't located yet, I'm waiting for, are kabocha squashes. We'll probably see those in the next week or 2. And I love to braise those. That is one recipe that I think it's worth peeling a kabocha for. So you take the kabocha and you cut it into crescents, and then you braise it in a soy kind of marinade. And it does turn dark, but the flavors, the combination is just magical. And you won't stop making it after that, even if it means peeling a hard raw kabocha.
No, and we'll try to share out a resource if you're maybe not as familiar with what they look like. That one's like a kind of an orange kind of round one, like a misshapen pumpkin, maybe, I don't know. But we'll throw some resources, just the terminology, and then just maybe if you are in a CSA, a quick tip, from Chef T about storage, because I do always like to remind people, this is the one thing in your share that can wait, right, Chef T? Like, if you're getting winter squash, you don't have to feel so overwhelmed, right? Because
this isn't something like when you start in spring, pretty much everything has to be used up that week, right? This is completely different. This is where you can relax into it a little and take your time and figure out what you want to do with those squashes.
Yeah. And on average, I know the squash variety really dictates it, but I usually keep mine and it's fine within like a month to 2 months but what would you recommend if people are getting them, how long to hold on to them, or maybe a little shorter?
I'd say 2 months or shorter. You probably could, and I probably have pushed it further than that, but you just never know, because if there's any dampness in them at all, then the rot will start. So you definitely want to keep an eye on them, just in case you have some either bruising or dampness, because then they will go quickly.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you for answering all of my questions. I hope some of my questions are also questions for folks that were tuning in. And I'm just going to quickly share my screen, and this is a reminder, and this is a thank you to Chef T so much for sharing all of her knowledge. We are actually, if you tuned into this event live, and we're going to drop a link into our survey. And if you tuned in live, please take our survey. You'll be entered to win the cookbook that's featured here in that picture. And then if you have other questions about winter squash, feel free to ask those in the CSA in Kentucky Facebook group. View the directory if you want to look for fall share options. We've got the seasonal icon. You'll see a fall leaf by the farms that offer those fall shares on the Kentucky Proud CSA directory. And just encourage you to sign up for a share with a local farm. Local food we are really blessed in Kentucky. Lots of farmers are extending their season. It doesn't end in October. So you can still purchase locally the rest of the year. And Chef T, thanks for displaying the cookbook.
There are lots of squash recipes right here, starting on page 165.
Yeah. So we love that one. It's very vegetable specific. So take our event survey. Let us know what you think, what other resources you might need, how you enjoyed this class. Appreciate your time today, Chef T. Thank you so much for all of your knowledge. We really value it. Very inspiring, and hope to see you all again on another class. Quick plug, if you are in the Lexington area, we are working with Chef T on a cooking class in October. So I'll send some information about that. We have a veggie hash. So if you're curious about how to do a hash with lots of CSA ingredients, join us in Lexington, October 17th. Chef T, do you have anything that you have going on that you want to plug, virtual or in person?
In person, first Friday, I think it's October 7th. We'll be right here in the Food Connection kitchen that is open to the community. We will be announcing our Bill Best Award winner and having a locally sourced breakfast for everyone. Breakfast starts at 7:30, and the lecture by the winner will start at 8. So we hope everyone will come join us.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Yeah, so if you're in the Lexington area, those happen with the Food Connection. First Fridays are awesome. They'll have it on their Facebook. So that's a great place to learn more about that event. Definitely check out the Find Your Fall CSA Fair. Go to the Facebook group, ask any questions you have. And if you're already a part of the CSA, that's awesome. We're so excited. And just if you need any other resources, that Facebook group is another good place for resources and recipes. And that's what a lot of the event organizers do and what we're posting in. And just want to mention all of the event organizers before we hop off the call. So that Facebook group and the Find Your Fall CSA Fair is a part of the Kentucky Proud, and Kentucky Department of Agriculture is a partner. The Food Connection with Chef T is a partner. Myself, I didn't really introduce myself. The Organic Association of Kentucky is who I work with, and we're a partner, as well as the Kentucky Horticulture Council and Edible Kentucky Magazine. So we've got a great group of organizers helping curate resources for you in the Facebook group as well as for this event. So thank you to all the organizers. We're so excited to be wrapping up the Find Your Fall CSA Fair with this demo. It's been awesome. Hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you all.